Baltimore has an insane opportunity, but it is also one that could backfire if Eric DeCosta gets it wrong. A new Bleacher Report article says Baltimore should sign four-time Pro Bowl wide receiver Stefon Diggs before training camp. And while the talent is obvious, there are major questions that the Ravens have to answer before making a call like this. Is Diggs the exact player that Baltimore's offense is missing, or would it go against everything that Eric DeCosta has spent years building within Baltimore's organization? We're going to break it down today. My name's Alassane, and welcome to another episode of Ravens Digest. But before we get into today's video, you guys are going to want to make sure to subscribe to Ravens Digest. Thank you guys again for hitting 500 subscribers. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers. It is completely free, no cost at all, and we're providing daily Ravens videos, rumors, and updates on a day-to-day basis. You guys are not going to want to miss on the content that we're providing at all. Now, specifically involving Stefon Diggs and the Baltimore Ravens question, why is this even being talked about as a whole? Now, Bleacher Report released an article listing 8 moves that they believe NFL teams should make before training camp. One of these moves was the Ravens signing Stefon Diggs. Now, to be clear, this isn't an insider report saying that Baltimore has already called Diggs or a deal has been closed. This is simply a writer looking at remaining free agents and saying that one team that Baltimore should take a chance on and a player that should have a chance taken on them by Baltimore is Stefon Diggs. And honestly, I kind of understand the thinking of Stefon Diggs and signing him in Baltimore. The Ravens aren't rebuilding. We aren't a young team. We're basically in the middle of trying to find that Super Bowl window with Lamar Jackson in the hopes of getting that first Super Bowl with Lamar in Baltimore. We're not a young team really trying to figure things out, and that's why the conversation of Stefon Diggs is worth having. When a player like Stefon Diggs' caliber and his resume is available this late in the offseason, every contender can ask themselves a question of, will he make us better going into the upcoming season? And this answer specifically with Stefon Diggs going to the Baltimore Ravens is a very interesting discussion purely because there are many factors that go into Stefon Diggs actually becoming a Baltimore Raven and EDC considering him as a player that we would want to have in our wide receiver room. But let's start with the easy part, because I don't think that anybody is questioning Stefon Diggs as a football player. If you look at what he has done over the last decade, we know that he is one of the NFL's most premier receivers. He has 4 Pro Bowlers, is a first-time All-Pro, and has led the NFL in receptions and receiving yards. He has over 11,000 receiving yards in his entire career with nearly 1,000 catches, and these numbers don't really happen by accident. Diggs has built a reputation as one of the cleanest route runners in football, and he creates separation almost effortlessly on route situations. Now, defensive backs have to constantly talk about how difficult it is to cover Stefon Diggs because his route running does not look the same every single snap. And he's never been the fastest player in football, and his player style never needed a 4.2 or a 4.3 speed. He just wins with technique, footwork, leverage, body control, and has a lot of football IQ. And this is something that at his 30s, he's still producing. And we're not strictly talking about his talent. There's not really a debate that Stefon Diggs can help an NFL team, and the Baltimore Ravens could benefit from using a player such as Stefon Diggs in the future. Now, why does this make sense for Baltimore? And let's flip this around and look at it from Stefon Diggs' perception as a whole. Now, Stefon Diggs, if you're looking at him right now, going to Baltimore is a chance for him to win immediately and has a quarterback to maximize what is left in the rest of Stefon Diggs' career. Baltimore checks a lot of boxes. As we know, Lamar Jackson is one of the most elite quarterbacks in football, and the Ravens are expected to compete for a Super Bowl this upcoming season. But since Baltimore has Derrick Henry and defenses are constantly forced to worry about Derrick Henry and the run game, this means lighter boxes, which could create more one-on-one opportunities for Stefon Diggs. During different points of his career, he was expected to be that guy. But in Baltimore, he wouldn't have the pressure of having to be our number one, as we have players such as Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. And the cool thing about Maryland and Stefon Diggs is that Stefon Diggs was also a member of UMD and the Terrapins, and he grew up in Maryland. Returning home in this stage of his career while also being able to compete for a Super Bowl is a pretty appealing situation for Stefon Diggs and could be something that leads him towards making a decision of wanting to pursue an opportunity with Baltimore if EDC decides to make a call. Now, this conversation gets very complicated in many different ways for many other reasons. Specifically, as we talked about, nobody questions Stefon Diggs as a football player, but there are many other things that come with Stefon Diggs and his entire reputation as a whole. Throughout his career, we've known Diggs to be one of the most emotional players in the NFL, and we've seen him be frustrated on sidelines, have very animated body language and conversations with coaches, and public speculation after he both left Minnesota and Buffalo, and now after his stint in the Patriots. Now, I'm not saying that every story regarding Stefon Diggs is true. As we know, we don't know everything that happens within an NFL locker room, but perception from the outside and the public does matter, and NFL general managers don't just evaluate talent, they evaluate the personalities and the team chemistry, and if one player will fit into the Ravens culture and the successful locker room. Due to this, one unhappy veteran can completely change the dynamic of a football team, and this is something that EDC has to think about if he is thinking about making a move for a veteran wide receiver of Stefon Diggs' caliber. But as we talked about, EDC keeps coming back, and we keep talking about EDC due to the way that he likes to build the Baltimore Ravens organization and the rest of the coaching staff. If you followed the Baltimore Ravens over the last couple of years, you've definitely noticed that EDC does not chase big names other than the fallen out Max Crosby situation. Every veteran that Baltimore brings in buys into the Ravens culture, which is a team-first accountability, competition, and selflessness ideology that EDC and the coaching staff want to implicate into the Baltimore Ravens core. Just because a player is very talented doesn't mean that the Baltimore Ravens are all of a sudden very interested. So here's the biggest question involving Stefon Diggs. Would he be a risk more than he would be a talent on the field? And is Stefon Diggs a player that can change the trajectory of the wide receiver room for the Ravens to have a crazy season going into the 2026-2027 season? But as we've talked about, one of the biggest questions Eric DeCosta has to answer before making a move such as this involves Stefon Diggs, his character, and what he is going to bring to the football field. As we know, talent isn't a question, and Baltimore's offense isn't built around force-feeding the ball to one receiver. There's a system where a wide receiver could get 4 to 5 carries one game and get 10 to 12 targets the very next game. Lamar Jackson has always been really good at deciding where to spread the ball and take whatever the defense gives him in multiple different plays. One week, it could be Zay Flowers going for 100 to 120 yards. And the very next week, it could be Derrick Henry dominating on the ground for 100 yards. And another week, it could be Mark Andrews going off for 80 to 100 yards in the middle of the field. Everybody needs to contribute for the Baltimore Ravens if the Baltimore Ravens want to win a Super Bowl. And throughout his entire career, Stefon Diggs is a receiver who wants to be involved in plays and make multiple targets and catches per game. And honestly, this is a mentality that has helped him become a very prominent receiver in football. But in Baltimore's case, the biggest question is, would Baltimore be comfortable getting this piece of the offense and making him a centerpiece in the offense towards having a successful 26-27 season from a receiver perspective? Would he be okay with catching 5 passes if Lamar is spreading the ball around to multiple different receivers? And would he have the same energy if Zay Flowers gets 10 catches one game and he gets 1 catch that game? Because the best teams in the NFL aren't purely based on teams that always have the most talent. It's about teams who understand their role and their impact as an organization. But one of the biggest ideas going into this receiver room is a part of the conversation that could get overlooked the most, especially since the Baltimore Ravens had just taken 2 rookie receivers in Jacoby Lane and Elijah Surratt. Diggs' signing wouldn't just impact the veterans on the team, he would impact the development of the young receivers. When you sign a player like Diggs, you're not going to sit him on the bench. He's going to play, he's going to get targets, and he's going to be on the field in very important situations. But Jacoby Lane is a player with legitimate upside, and his biggest strengths are his size, his catch radius, and winning contested catches. The Baltimore Ravens always look to create mismatches in the passing game, and Lane is a player that has the potential to be this player. But the reality is rookie receivers really need reps, and if Diggs joins the roster, Lane's snap count could take a hit going into this upcoming season. The same thing applies for Elijah Surratt, as he's a reputation and has a reputation for being a receiver who is very polished and reliable and a great route runner, as you could see him and Fernando Mendoza connecting at Indiana. But practice reps are very important. You can't implicate or replace real NFL game snaps. And I believe that Surratt and Lane both deserve to be targeted in NFL rep situations, and a veteran such as Stefon Diggs could really impact this and make it tougher for them to be able to grab the headlining and the playing time that they're looking for as rookies. Now, the Baltimore Ravens and Stefon Diggs is a pretty major signing. Are they building for the next era of football, or is Diggs trying to be a receiver who can create a new level and a new understanding, as we've seen receivers such as OBJ and the Des Bryants come in and have an impact from a veteran perspective? One other factor that needs to be discussed when we talk about Stefon Diggs and him joining the Baltimore Ravens is the contract situation. It's always about money, and EDC has been a very disciplined GM when it comes to contracts. Baltimore is not looking to really hand out a big deal just because of the name, and this is where it becomes very interesting for Stefon Diggs. Signing Diggs to a team-friendly deal would be great, but we cannot pay Stefon Diggs like he is a top 5 receiver still in the NFL. These are completely different situations, and it also depends on what Diggs thinks that he should be paid. If Diggs is looking for a one-year deal, a chance to compete, and an opportunity to play with Lamar, then Baltimore has a very realistic option and should look for adding a veteran of this caliber. But if Diggs wants a bigger contract, then I would completely understand Baltimore backing away, as we have young players that we need to play and develop, and there's players that need future extensions coming up in the next year or two. Spending significant money on a 32-year-old only makes sense if his impact is undeniable. And yes, he did have a really good season with the Patriots last season and ended up in the Super Bowl, but we know that EDC cannot sacrifice for the future for the long-term and short-term gain of the Baltimore Ravens. So if you look at everything and Stefon Diggs, should the Baltimore Ravens actually make a call for Stefon Diggs? My answer is pretty simple. It depends on the version of Stefon Diggs that Baltimore is getting. If we're getting a motivated veteran who wants to win, then I'm very interested. But if he's looking to have a one-year situation and demand targets and have the offense revolve around him, then I would completely stay away from getting Stefon Diggs because this is not how our offense operates as a whole. Now, this is what makes it such an interesting decision for the Ravens, as we know he is one of the most talented receivers of the generation, and he would make the offense very dangerous. But EDC has never based the team on collecting talent. He builds around the culture, the chemistry, and players who would understand their role as a Baltimore Raven. Signing Diggs could give Lamar Jackson another weapon and potentially push the offense to the next level, but it could really limit the opportunities of the Surratt and the Jacoby Lanes, who are creating questions about Diggs and what Baltimore has already built in their culture. At the end of the day, the decision isn't built around whether Diggs can play, it's around whether he's the right player for the right place and the right price for the Baltimore Ravens right now. Now, I want to hear from you guys, Ravens flock. If you're EDC, are you picking up the phone and calling Stefon Diggs, or are you trusting within the young guys in the system to develop over the course of training camp and going into the season for them to be elite core pieces that we rely on in the future? Let me know what you guys think down below, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit the like button, comment, subscribe to Ravens Digest, and turn on the post notifications for daily and latest Baltimore Ravens news, rumors, analysis, and updates. Thanks for watching Ravens Digest, and we'll see you on the next breakdown and the next recap. Until then, Ravens flock always.